I went undercover at a conference in Chicago, literally called the Socialism Conference. The teachers' unions are run by these people. And their number one goal is to attack capitalism. When they say capitalism, they explicitly mean private property ownership. What queer means is a far-left political ideology that is designed explicitly to destabilize the system, destabilize our societal norms. Upwards of 40% of students are identifying as genderqueer, gender nonconforming, gender non-binary. What they believe is that they cannot abolish capitalism and get to their Marxist utopia unless the nuclear family falls. Does everyone have a drink? Because I promise you, you are going to need them all throughout. You may even want to order two. I'm just saying, it is a little bit terrifying what I'm going to teach you guys tonight. So how many of you remember about 4 years ago, there was this crazy knitting Democrat that went to a Trump rally and then posted an article on the internet saying, I was a Democrat that went to a Trump rally and left the party? A couple people? Yeah, that was me. That was me. That was me. And, you know, I never actually expected to end up in this world. It was a complete accident that I did this. I never expected anyone to read that essay, but when they did, that launched me into the political space, and all of a sudden I was being trotted all over the country on Fox News, and I had a PragerU video, and like all this stuff. I was touring all over the country with the Walk Away campaign, doing rallies all the time. Some of you may have seen me get chased down the street by Black Lives Matter on Fox News. That was really fun. They jumped on my back. They tried to steal my phone. Whatever. I outran them. Anyway, 2020 was an eventful year for me, and then I went back to New Hampshire, and I wrote this book, Actively Unwoke, The Ultimate Guide for Fighting Back Against the Woke Insanity in Your Life. And I have one copy of it here tonight, so whoever asks the best question, as judged by me, gets a copy of the book. And it may just be a matter of making me laugh with your question, just as a pro tip. And I kind of thought, like, I understood the left. I kind of thought, like, you've done all this stuff, you've literally written a book about it, you've been chased by like, where else could we go from here? Well, let me tell you what happened after that, because after Joe Biden took office, I'm an industrial organizational psychologist by trade, and what I started doing on my YouTube channel is we would just start watching diversity trainings, because that was where a lot of this crazy stuff like CRT was coming from at the time. It was diversity trainings in the workplace, and from diversity trainings in the workplace, I started watching a lot of college classes where they're teaching these kids a lot of woke concepts, and then I would start to watch these Zoom classes that these high schoolers would send me, because I had a YouTube channel and they liked that stuff, so they recorded their high school classes where the teachers were teaching all this woke stuff, and so I just kept kind of going back and back and back and back and back, and almost 2 years ago now, I landed on hardcore, radical, revolutionary socialists, and I've never looked back. That is me actually undercover at a socialism conference where I'm dressed as a socialist. And come to think of it, it doesn't actually look different from me dressed normally. So that kind of works out well for me. And of course, like, if you guys think I didn't design my costume around my socialism thumbnail for my YouTube page, like, obviously I did. But this was actually one of the most impactful things I've done, because one of the things I do is that I go undercover at in-person far-left events, because I'm crazy. And back in September, I went undercover at a conference in Chicago, literally called the Socialism Conference. And by the way, it's in exactly the same location as the Democratic National Convention is going to be in a couple months, and I'm sure that's just a coincidence. But this is a conference that is attended by 400 of the most far-left activists you're going to see in the country. And when I say far-left, I do not mean the Democratic Party. The real socialists do not consider the Democrats to be socialists. Real socialists do not consider the progressives to be socialists. They do not consider Bernie Sanders to be a socialist, or AOC. They talk about this openly. And so we're talking about, you know, extreme far-left activists, people who work in universities, people who are publishing books. And yes, Antifa was there, and I was holding my breath the entire time, hoping they wouldn't recognize me. But I want to start off tonight playing a couple of clips that I recorded at this conference. Now, we're going to watch a lot of clips tonight. We're going to watch a lot of videos. I want to just warn you guys, these are going to be some of the hardest clips to kind of hear the sound out of because I was literally recording them on a device in my pocket that big. So we have to make allowances, but they do have captions on the screen, and so hopefully it comes through. Let me play you what I recorded the president of the American Library Association saying at the Socialism 2023 conference.
So this comrade will be followed by the comrade in the green, followed by the comrade here.
Hi, I'm Emily, and I'm a librarian. I just wanted to say thank you so much. I just want to say thank you for bringing up libraries and classroom libraries, but also school libraries of all kinds, public libraries and higher education libraries who have been under attack in similar ways. But I think your point that public education needs to be a site of socialist organizing, I think libraries really do too. And that I haven't seen that for the people that are working in libraries, but I think there's a real opportunity here to both connect what's happening in public education, what's happening in libraries, but also we need some help in the libraries, and we need to be on the agenda of socialist organizing. So I just want to get up and say that. So thank you.
The president of the American Library Association saying on the record, libraries need to be sites of socialist organizing. And I'll tell you, I've met a lot of librarians since I released that clip, and the new incoming president of the American Library Association is actually probably going to be worse than Emily is. This is the reality in which we are dealing with. These people are open, they're out in the public. I mean, this wasn't a public event, but they don't have a problem saying this up front. I want to also turn to the issue of the schools, because in this presentation where I caught this was actually not a presentation about libraries. This was a presentation about how to do socialist activism and organizing in the public schools. It was led by a guy named Jesse Hagopian. Jesse Hagopian is a high school teacher out of Seattle. He teaches social studies, which is just great for us. And in this same presentation, I got Jesse Hagopian on tape saying that he is working with teachers in Florida where all of these concepts are banned, and what's going on is the teachers in Florida are Zooming Jesse Hagopian into their classrooms so he can teach the banned concepts to get around the Florida laws. Let's listen.
All right, thank you everybody. I'm Jesse Hagopian. I'm a teacher in Seattle, and I work with Black Lives Matter at School and the Zen Education Project and Rethinking Schools. So I've actually got to Zoom in and do meetings with classrooms in Florida and with some bold teachers who invited us into the classroom in the tradition of fugitive pedagogy, and smuggling in contraband curriculum, showing the film The Rebellious Life of Mrs. Rosa Parks, and then having us come and discuss systemic racism in a state where it's illegal. And so that rebellion is inspiring to me, and telling teachers in my state to do this work if they can do it in those conditions, right?
At this same event, in this same session, Jesse Hagopian literally talks about how they use anti-racist education in schools to build a socialist world. That is the intent of what anti-racist education is. Now, I have one more clip from this conference because, kind of intro us and get you guys really kind of like into the nightmare that is the radical revolutionary far left. What is their goal? What do they want? Do they just want to dye their hair crazy colors and run around putting their fists in the air and yelling at people? Well, no, they want something a little bit more than that. This is an associate professor of nursing at DePaul University in Minnesota. Her name is Mary. Mary is a very special socialist, okay? Mary says the quiet part out loud quite a bit. I have a lot of clips of Mary. And what's funny about this is this wasn't even privately recorded by me. They broadcasted this on their YouTube channel live. Let's listen.
And yes, ultimately, and if that wasn't clear from the end of my talk, that will require a revolution. We cannot be free under capitalism. We cannot be free in this society as long as any person is in prison, as long as any person is denied health care for something necessary. No, that will never be free.
They want a revolution against capitalism. Let's take that and put it in our back pocket for a moment, because I've got a lot more clips to play for you guys tonight, but I wanted to start off with these clips just to kind of give you the idea. It's so much worse than you guys think it is. It is so much worse than what you see reported on conservative media. In fact, I am continually amazed at the amount of things conservative media does not cover and does not inform their audiences of, because I see it. I see it directly firsthand. I go into their private events. I go in person to their private events. I have to wear disguises and dye my hair and do all this stuff. And I get these clips and I give them to conservative media and they're like, nah, we don't need to show people that. Well, I disagree. I think the very best way to know how to beat the left is to understand what they are doing in the real world today. And a lot of times when people talk about the left, it's from an academic perspective. They go back, they read a lot of academic papers, and they say this is what they were writing about in the academic papers 20, 50, 100 years ago, and that's how they're applying this today. I'm not saying that doesn't have any value, but it doesn't compare to going into their spaces, to listening to them directly. And that's what I do 6 days a week on my YouTube and Rumble channels, and I do this in person when I can. And so we're gonna go through just a couple of the things that I've learned and the most important things that I want you guys to take away from tonight. So the Socialism Conference was not the first time I went undercover. Actually, the first time I went undercover at a socialist event was almost a year ago. It was April 15th of last year. And to be honest, I kind of thought it was a joke. I was like, there was this event called the Collective Power Conference that was a reproductive justice event about 2 hours away from my house at Hampshire College. Reproductive justice means abortion. And I was like, you know what? What else am I going to do on a Saturday? Why did I go to a socialist conference? Why did I just see what it's like in person? I had been watching socialists on the internet for a year, and I was like, okay, it's time to go in. Just like when you went to that Trump rally, you had to go into the pool eventually. Now you got to jump in head first, go to the Socialism Conference. When I got done at the Socialism Conference that day, I ran to my car because I was very nervous they were going to recognize me at some point. And I took my phone out and I filmed a video. And I wasn't going to play this originally, but I had a little extra time in the presentation, and I thought, I want you guys to see how badly the fear of God was struck into me at this Socialism Conference this is my instant gut reaction of what came out of it. You guys are not going to believe this. You are not going to believe this. I just spent a full day with like 250 socialists at a day-long socialist conference at Hampshire College. I got here like 8:30 this morning. It's what, like 6 o'clock now? I'm wrapping up, about to drive home. And I was like undercover. I had to wear a mask and everything. They thought I was one of them. You are not going to effing believe the things that I heard today. You guys think the socialists are crazy online? No. No. No, 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 no. They are next level insane when they think they're only around people who agree with them. None of the clips that you have ever seen from Libs of TikTok is more than what I saw today. I promise you that. I promise you. Now, I didn't record it. I couldn't record it. But I have lots of pictures. I took like 25 pages worth of notes. I have so much literature that I got at the conference. I have like a 4-page pamphlet of every single trans book directed at elementary school kids. I got to go on a tour of how you self-manage your abortion. And did you know that when you self-manage your abortion, it's nice to have a nice cup of tea and a warm bed that you can relax in? And oh, by the way, an abortion doula that will sit next to you while you're on the toilet bleeding out the child. And mind you, I'm pro-choice, but I'm not this pro-choice. They actually recommended getting an abortion doula to hold your hand as you are sitting on the toilet bleeding from self-managing your abortion. If I had gotten to the self-managed abortion tour earlier in the day, I could have gotten a free t-shirt with the names of the pills that you take to self-manage your abortion. And by the way, the toilet is not the last stop on the self-managed abortion tour. The shrine with crystals and candles where you take care of yourself and your spiritual needs following the self-managed abortion is the last stop on the tour. I've got pictures of all of this. I sat in on, I realized I was in one breakout session, and I realized while I was in the breakout session that the woman leading the session had blocked me on Twitter, which was hilarious. Thank God I was wearing a mask. I almost burst out laughing. I was also in a session with the woman who runs the Institute for the Research into Male Supremacy. And that session was a trip, man. I was sitting in that session and I looked around the room and there were all these college students, these gender studies majors. They all had shaved heads, unshaved legs, unshaved armpits, the whole nine. I have never been around this many socialists in my life. I was like, I am quite literally in an episode of Socialism Saturday right now. I am in the episode. And I almost burst out laughing in the middle of the session because it was so absurd. And the things they were saying were so insane. I can't wait to tell you guys all about it. Anyway, there's a little bit more to the video than that. But that was my instant gut reaction was I really did have like the fear of God struck into me. I didn't realize how serious this problem was until I was literally in the middle of a room surrounded by gender studies majors. And it's every stereotype that you think of these people. Now, I mentioned a couple things in that video. I mentioned the craziest part of that undercover experience was the at-home bathroom abortion tour. This is just a couple pictures of this. This is the toilet from the at-home bathroom abortion tour, and the sign that says an abortion doula. Now, I had heard of a doula to help deliver children at that point. I had heard of doulas that help people through the process of dying, which I think is a really beautiful thing. I had never heard of an abortion doula, but apparently you can make $600 to $800 per abortion by being an abortion doula just by holding someone's hand as they're doing their thing on the toilet. And by the way, there was a presentation at the University of California at Berkeley the day after the Roe v. Wade draft decision was released, back in the day when we weren't sure if it was going to be overturned or not. And they were literally talking about using the abortion pills that they were talking about in that abortion tour to smuggle them into states where abortion would be banned. And so they're already looking for ways to get around those laws. And then I mentioned the abortion shrine. There was a literal abortion shrine where they went to worship themselves after they had their abortion. Some people have said to me, are you sure that's not about praying for the soul of the unborn baby? Well, yeah, I am, because there was something on the shrine that says, loving yourself is the greatest revolution. So that is literally a self-worship abortion shrine, if you ever wondered what one of those would look like. So that was a pretty crazy experience for me. That was life-changing. My latest undercover thing was at the University of Colorado at Boulder a couple weeks ago. I went to something called the Transforming Gender Conference, and this was a gender ideology conference. There were trans flags everywhere, every possible trans flag you could want, trans people of all ages. And actually, it's funny, the older trans people are actually the more sane. They just want to be left alone. It's the younger trans people that we need to be worried about. And the craziest presentation I saw at that one, and you can find a full recording of this on my Substack, is this person right here. That's not just one person. That's 6 people. There are 6 people in there. And 2 of them gave a presentation at this conference. And one of them uses the pronouns it, its, and the other one uses the pronouns they, them. And so they gave a presentation about how dissociative disorder, which some of you might know as multiple personality disorder, is a gender identity. They're treating it as a gender identity. It's called system gender. It's when different personalities within a single person have different genders, and apparently there are therapists for this. And yeah, that's pretty I thought I had seen it all until I got to the multiple personality disorder is a gender identity presentation, if I'm honest about it. So what does woke have to do with socialism? I want to make this really clear up front, because sometimes people, they see this socialist thing I do and they say, Karlyn, none of this stuff is real. These are people off in a far off corner of the world, and we know the Democrats are doing crazy things, but this is just too much. Like this, there can't be that many of these people. No, there are, and I really don't think people understand. There are thousands of these groups across the country. There are small little groups, but there are thousands of them, and they are communicating with each other, and every single crazy idea in the world today is being driven by these people. Every single question about critical race theory, racism, white supremacy is driven by these people. Everything around gender, gender ideology, the patriarchy, all that, driven by these people. Transing kids in schools, attacks on parental rights, all driven by these people. Defunding the police, abolishing the police, driven by these people. Everything around social justice, climate change, all of those things. Everything around universal health care, universal child care, public education. The teachers' unions are run by these people. And their number one goal is to attack capitalism. And people really need to understand this. And I think it's almost one of those things that, of course, socialists want to attack capitalism, but what does that mean? And so many people on the left are talking about, race and gender identity and all that it becomes very confusing to understand how those things relate back to capitalism. So that's what we're going to talk about, and I'm going to show you exactly how each of these crazy things gets to their ultimate goal. But I want to just preempt a question, because the number one question I'm asked, especially when I talk about critical race theory being related to capitalism, is, Karlyn, if the left means capitalism when they use this language, why don't they just say capitalism? Okay, let's listen to Barack Obama and let's watch him say capitalism.
But just because an economic system generates wealth and innovation doesn't mean it guarantees a good society. Because from the outset, turns out market-based systems have been compatible with slavery, caste systems, colonialization, war, exploitation, corruption, fraud, autocracy, the poisoning of our natural environment. Fortunately, thanks to the accumulated efforts, bit by bit, of reformers and organizers and visionaries not so different from many of you, some, mostly democratic governments, began to recognize the need to moderate capitalism's excesses.
Barack Obama literally just told us, and this was at a speech in November, that capitalism is the cause of all the problems that he listed before that. So they are saying capitalism. It's subtle sometimes, and it's easy to overlook. But that is the goal, and it's very important for people to understand that's the goal, because this is going to impact everyone. Let me tell you specifically what they mean when they say capitalism, and this is from watching thousands of hours of far-left training. I have literally driven myself insane to bring you guys this information, okay? Everything that I'm saying in this presentation, I have the far left on video saying, and you're just gonna have to trust me for some of it for right now. Some of you might think of the term capitalism and you might say, capitalism has its problems. There's crony capitalism, there's corrupt capitalism. Valid, all right? We need to put that argument aside right now, though, because that's not what the left is talking about. When they say capitalism, they explicitly mean private property ownership. And what that means is your ability to own a home, your ability to own land, your ability to own an apartment rental or an Airbnb that you rent out, your intellectual property that you might have by creating content on the internet. They mean your ability to own your own private business. They mean your parental rights. They consider parental rights to be a form of private property. And they mean your individual liberties, your ability to have free speech, freedom of religion. All of those things are considered to be private property under capitalism. And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to walk you through the big three things and show you a couple examples of each about how these crazy things that the left is doing relate back to capitalism. The left speaks in a coded language. It might sound as though they're all speaking English, but they're not. They're speaking the language of socialists. And so you have to learn that they might be using the same vocabulary as you, but they are using a completely different dictionary. And until you understand their dictionary, it might be hard to see how some of these things relate. Let's start with the toughest one. If you can wrap your head around this, you will understand socialism. Anytime the left says whiteness, white supremacy, racism, things like that, they do not mean your skin color. They mean the system that upholds racism in this country. Let me explain how this works. The left believes that capitalism, private property ownership, created the institution of slavery in America because slavery is about people being owned as private property. The ownership of people as private property created something called systemic or institutional racism. Some of you might remember back in 2020, the left actually updated the dictionary definition of racism, and they updated it to include this idea of systemic or institutional racism. When they are saying whiteness, what they're referring to is the system that upholds racism or the institution that upholds racism. And that institution is capitalism. That's what the target is. And they use race, skin color, as a way to get people all pissed off. And, you know, I'm not a racist. Of course I'm not a racist and all this stuff. It's not about your skin color, and it's not about if you have black friends. It's not about if you're doing anything negative at all. They want to get you riled up, and they want to keep you distracted so you don't see what the real target is. Some of you might remember this was put in the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C. back in 2020. And what this says is the aspects and assumptions of whiteness or white supremacy culture. And it was very confusing for people when this was put in the Museum of African American History because it has things on it like telling time, working hard, rugged individualism, things like that. And so when this was put in the African American History Museum, people are like, you think black people can't tell time? You think they can't work hard? Like, this doesn't even make any sense. It does make sense when you understand that they're not referring to skin color, they're referring to the system of capitalism. And everything that was on this list is an aspect that the left believes upholds capitalism. Now, I want to play you a few short clips. This is from a woman named Cheryl Harris. Cheryl Harris is a professor at UCLA Law, and in 1993, she wrote a really famous paper called Whiteness as Property. This is a speech from the 20th anniversary celebration of that paper, and you're going to hear Cheryl Harris say, whiteness is not about your skin color, and whiteness needs to be directly linked to capitalism. Let's listen.
Whiteness is not a skin color or even a racial type. It is a social relation constructed on exclusion, structural privilege, and its valorization. Rather than mobilizing a sense of linked fate that dismantling racial hierarchy is joined with addressing the problem of capitalism, these projects are placed in opposition, and the challenge to white entitlement or white privilege is then recast as an elitist, anti-populist project.
The far left see the fight over ending racism and the fight over ending capitalism as inextricably linked. They talk about it in the same sentence. This is actually from a socialist magazine that I got at the socialism conference. They actually produce great magazines, by the way. And part of the reasons, by the way, that the socialists are kind of like outrunning the right now is they produce so many publications and periodicals. It is insane. Maybe we can talk more about that later. This is a book that was written last year published by one of the larger socialist book publishers, Borysenko Books, and the title of the book is What is Anti-Racism and Why It Means Anti-Capitalism. It's like they're screaming at us what they're doing and who the target is, and it's like we aren't listening. I want to introduce you to this woman. Her name is Dina Simmons. Dina Simmons was paid $32,000 by the Cambridge, Massachusetts School District for a weekend training with the teachers in that district where she taught them to undo their inherent whiteness. Socialists are not opposed to using capitalism when it allows them to try to undermine the system of capitalism by charging tens of thousands of dollars for a weekend to teach people that they're racist when they're really not. And I want to play you a clip of Dina and actually another teacher trainer named Bettina Love, who is an absolute nightmare. They're going to talk to you about how whiteness and capitalism are inextricably linked in their eyes.
Based on the people that we're citing here, Angela Davis, Ruth Wilson Gilmore, and others, that a lot of their work is inseparable from anti-capitalism. Is abolitionist teaching anti-capitalist by nature?
Abolition is anti-capitalist by nature. You know, we know right now that capitalism is the structure that we are under. And so we're going to use this structure to our best ability. But what we also know is that capitalism will not free us.
And you got to remember that this country was built off of stolen Black labor, and that all of those folks who are positions of power who have that money, you got it because you stole it. you know? And I think, you know, it's always so funny. Can I throw money at that? I'm like, yo, that money's mine. Like, that money is mine, actually. You stole it, you know? And I think, of course, you know, being, you know, an abolitionist is anti-capitalism, right? Because there's a connection between capitalism and slavery in this country. There's a capitalism between, you know, how communities like redlining were built to disenfranchise people, how, you know, the hierarchy of structures in organizations, who gets paid and who has the power to say this, that's all capitalism. And honestly, to me, that's whiteness. And we have to eradicate whiteness. We have to abolish whiteness as well.
We have to eradicate capitalism and we have to abolish whiteness as well. They speak about these ideas as they are in the same sentence. And if you're still struggling with this, you're saying, no, of course they hate white people, Karlyn. I understand it. I really, really do. There are a lot of crazy videos out there of people who are not the higher level activists, you know, saying things like that. But I want people to step back and see the bigger picture of they're not trying to get rid of white people. I go to socialist events. There are a lot of white people. They really are. They love white people who agree with them. And so I want people just to, you know, look out for this and make sure whenever you're seeing this stuff show up in real life, ask yourself, are they really talking about skin color or are they talking about systemic racism, institutional racism? Because probably 85 to 90% of the time I see videos like this, it is about the system. It is not about the skin color. That is the biggest problem we're facing right now. And by the way, all the defund the police stuff also has to do with abolishing capitalism. This was an assignment that was actually given out in schools in 2020, which was the best time ever to learn what the schools were actually teaching. And this was an assignment that compared police officers to the KKK. And basically the position of the left is that the police are the managers of private property. And they stem, this is what they believe, not what I believe, they stem from people who were charged with arresting runaway slaves when they ran away. That's why they're the managers of private property. Prison abolition, defunding the police, abolishing the police, that is one of the top issues on the far left. If you're wondering why you're seeing crime decriminalized across the country, you're seeing bails reduced to like nothing, like no one has any consequences for anything, you're seeing all these crazy videos of people stealing from the stores, no one's doing anything about it, it is because of these people. They want the police gone. They believe that when they have their Marxist utopia, there will be no crime, because they will have fixed every single problem by having their Marxist utopia, and so there will be no more need for the police. Fun times ahead for all. I want to move into the topic of gender. Now, this is actually one of the things that I'm most concerned about, this combined with the nuclear family, which we're going to talk about next, because I research into school districts, and I look at school districts in which upwards of 40% of students are identifying as genderqueer, gender nonconforming, gender non-binary. This didn't happen 10 years ago. And that's because they have pushed gender ideology into every part of the curriculum, starting when these kids are 5 years old. Now, let me explain to you how gender relates back to capitalism. What the left believes is capitalism created the gender binary. The gender binary is men and women. It put men in the workplace where they got to have the jobs and make all the money. It put women in the home to do the unpaid labor of raising the children, who they also consider to be the future generation of proletarian workers that are going to be oppressed under capitalism. That gets into the nuclear family. We're going to put that aside for 1 second. But what I want you guys to hear is that the target of the left when it comes to gender is quite literally the gender binary. Their goal is to abolish the gender binary. What that means is they want to get rid of men and they want to get rid of women. They want to create a world of they, thems in which everyone is non-binary. Non-binary literally means no binary. So anytime you're seeing people pop up with the they, them pronouns, that is an example of non-binary. Anytime you're seeing people even with like she, they pronouns or he, they pronouns, that's tiptoeing into the non-binary. These are two stories that I covered. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one to cover both of these. Tufts University is actually studying non-binary 3-year-olds. Like, I know this is like tens of thousands of dollars are going into this study. What even is a non-binary 3-year-old and why are they studying them? But in the process of researching the Tufts study, I found out There's a middle school that just opened in New York City that is only for non-binary and trans kids. It's literally a grooming middle school that is just reinforcing gender ideology to these kids, and it's being framed as like, you get to be around people who understand you, your identity is going to be affirmed, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Like, is that a little dystopian to anyone else? It was a little dystopian to me. But what I tend to focus on is, I want to know what the taxpayers are funding. Like, I'm an anarchist. I don't think the government should exist, and I definitely don't think taxes should exist. And I don't want to be paying for any of this, and I don't think you guys want to be paying for any of this either. So one of the things I did recently, and this was a couple months ago, I infiltrated a virtual training that was being funded by the Washington, D.C. Mayor's Office. And in that training, and this was to city employees, taxpayer employees in Washington, D.C., they literally taught to get rid of all gendered pronouns. So get rid of words like mother, father, brother, sister, husband, wife. You're not allowed to say those anymore according to these trainings. This is not the only training like that I've sat in. I've sat in like probably a dozen of these trainings where they're teaching exactly the same thing, telling people to stop using gendered pronouns. They're doing that because they want to abolish the gender binary. But actually, fun for us, because not only is local city government doing this in very blue areas, the federal government is also funding this stuff. So, and this I found on a random YouTube channel. I find my best content on random YouTube channels that have like a couple hundred subscribers that have no views from anyone, because who really wants to sit around and watch diversity training all the time? Me. So I found this one, and this is a federally funded training that was given to teachers in Orange County, California. And in this one, what they say is that if a kid walks into a classroom and writes, "There are only two genders" on the chalkboard, that is considered harassment. Let's listen.
And then we're required to intervene if we witness discrimination, harassment, right? I know at school sometimes when we say the word bullying, we kind of just, our brain just shuts off. Like, don't talk to me anymore about bullying. But if we're talking about on that one, what the law says in intimidation, that's kind of like the lowest bar right there, the lowest hanging fruit. Intimidation, what does that look like? You know, if a student walks into a classroom and says, "There's only two genders," and writes it on the board, as I've been getting calls about when we start school again, right? Kids come back from the summer and they've got a lot to say. That's intimidation. That's harassment. We have a duty to intervene. But how do we do it? How does our staff know how to do it, right? We have to give them those tools. Most of our staff have not been trained. Even you all here today who found out about this because you're in this work, you're looking for it, like 75% of you, this is your first gender identity training, right? On the thing.
That was to a room full of teachers, public school teachers. That was funded by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Fun times. Now, these ideas are all coming from something called queer theory or queer Marxism. Now, when many of you hear the term queer, you might think that means to be gay or trans, right? I mean, I think that's a pretty common thing, and maybe it did mean that at one time, but that's not what the word queer means anymore, and it's certainly not how they're using it. What queer means is a far-left political ideology that is designed explicitly to destabilize the system, destabilize our societal norms, because they can't usher in their Marxist utopia unless they destabilize our societal norms. That's just the way it goes. And sometimes you even see this stuff show up in pop culture. So there's a show called The Book of Queer on Discovery Plus, and it's an interesting show if you are so inclined, but they did an episode about how Abraham Lincoln is queer. And I'm not going to go into their argument on that because I don't think it's real, but I want to just play you a brief clip of that show where they explain what the definition of queer is and why they're using it.
Howdy, I'm Eric Cervini, the Book of Queer's resident homo historian. Welcome to the footnotes. You may have noticed that we haven't labeled Abe gay because that wouldn't make too much sense. Why? Because sexuality, just like race and gender, is what we call a social construct, or a concept that we as a society just came up with. And during Lincoln's time, the idea of a homosexual hadn't yet been conceived or constructed in the English language. For hundreds of years, people didn't agree on a word for men who loved men. And given all of these changes in language throughout history, that's why we love the word queer. All it means, in the words of queer theorist David Halperin, is whatever's at odds with the normal, the legitimate, the dominant. And hey, we may even come up with newer social constructs to describe ourselves in the future. After all, they're really just figments of our collective imagination.
So according to the Book of Queer, queer means whatever is at odds with the normal, the legitimate, the dominant. A lot of queer theory, queer Marxism, which is where gender ideology comes from, is about delegitimizing what they call normativity. And by the way, they don't actually like gay people who just like settle down and get married and have a family. They don't actually like them any more than they like straight people. It's actually funny. So they call straight people who get married and settle down and have kids, they call that homonormativity, basically heterosexual normality, and they want to disrupt that with queer. But when gay people just settle down and then they just like, we just want to be married and we just want to have a life, they call that homonormativity. And that's like a slur. It's like they're saying you've assimilated to the straights. You're not part of our team anymore. You're not on our far left political ideology bandwagon. And they're just as, you know, kind of like shunned from the left as anyone else. But it's also queer Marxism that is leading to the attacks on the nuclear family. And this is what I've actually covered, abolish the family movements more than anyone on the internet, I think, just because it's so dystopian and it's so crazy. And you almost can't imagine what you're hearing when they're talking about this, but this is a real thing. The Abolish the Family movement is real. These are two books. These are two of my favorite Abolish the Family activists. I do have favorites. We have Emmy O'Brien and Sophie Lewis. Emmy O'Brien and Sophie Lewis happen to be best friends for, you know, reasons. And they literally write books and speak all over the country, encouraging people to consider abolishing the nuclear family. So what is the rationale for that? Why do they want to abolish the family? Well, it again all goes back to capitalism. Because remember how we talked about capitalism created the gender binary, which put men in the workplace, women in the household. That's why they're attacking the gender binary. But when women got put into the household, that is what they believe created the nuclear family. That's where they believe the children who are going to become the oppressed workers are born and raised within the social construct of capitalism. They literally believe, you know, we all know that socialists want to control the means of production, right? Means of production doesn't mean the factories anymore. Like we don't, I mean, there are of course still factories that exist, but what they're talking about now is the family. The nuclear family is the means of production of capitalism. It's this idea called social reproduction theory, which essentially means that social systems will continue to reproduce themselves until they are disrupted by some outside force. What they believe is that they cannot abolish capitalism and get to their Marxist utopia unless the nuclear family falls. This is the thing that we've got to protect at all costs, because if the nuclear family falls, everything falls after that. And I'm sure many of you are aware of the ongoing attacks on parental rights that are existing all over the country. They're happening in schools. Almost every single school district in the country has some sort of policy on the books that says that schools will not inform parents if their kids start going by different names and different pronouns at schools. There have been documented cases of the state taking kids away if the parents won't give them the gender-affirming hormones that the kids feel like they need. This is going on all over the country, and this is being pushed in major media publications. We've got the AP with the headline, "Trans Minors Protected from Their Parents Under Washington Law." I personally know someone, she's an amazing gender activist. She goes by Erin for Parental Rights on Twitter. Her daughter was socially transitioned in the schools in an after-school art club where she showed up to this after-school art club. She was given all the glittery rainbow things, and then the advisor took her aside and said, "Don't tell your parents about this. They might not love you anymore if they know you're queer." This happens all the time. I know multiple families this has happened to. We've got this article in The Atlantic, "Children are not property." That headline's very specific. That author admits she was a socialist at the bottom of that article. And I was like, and I knew it from reading it. I was like, anyone who's referring to children as property and saying they shouldn't be property, that's a socialist right there. But she actually said it in the article. So this sounds crazy. And I know this sounds crazy, but there are very real world implications that are going to impact everyone. And I really do believe that if we don't get on the ball and start pushing back against this, a lot of people are going to lose their kids. And a lot of kids are going to be socially transitioned to believe they're genderqueer when they're not. And I think it's a bigger problem than most people think. Just got a few quick clips with this. This is actually funny. This next clip we're going to watch is I just got this one last week. I found a random recording on just like some random person's YouTube channel from a conference that was hosted by the California community colleges. And so you're going to listen to actual community college professors explaining that the nuclear family is inextricably connected to capitalism. And in order to abolish the nuclear family, we need to queer the family, which is about destabilizing it and going against normativity. And that's what their big plan is. Let's listen.
The nuclear family is that restrictive family model that consists of two differently gendered adults in a fertile monogamous relationship, living together and raising their biological children. So in other words, a monogamous heterosexual couple and their offspring living together. And that nuclear family vision was constructed to fit the needs of a capitalist, heteronormative, patriarchal, and white supremacist society. It was built in the 19th and 20th century for an industrialized capitalist system. One person stays at home to do the unpaid labor, so the other can work as many paid hours as possible. In sociology, we call this the breadwinner homemaker model. It's patriarchal because women are expected to stay home, work for free, and be economically dependent on men. It naturalizes a version of femininity as fixed and satisfied with this nurturing role, and a version of masculinity that is fixed and that rejects care work in favor of taking care of business. It's heteronormative because it naturalizes that differently gendered division of labor, plus other pillars of heterosexuality like monogamy and separation of friendship and romantic relationships. It's part of white supremacy because it centers a family structure that's most common in white families and stigmatizes other types of families, whether they be extended or dispersed or single parent households or matriarchal structures, etc., that are more common in BIPOC and immigrant communities. These traditions have deep cultural and emotional significance, but are too often viewed as pathological because they deviate from this nuclear model. So as we can see from that leaked Roe v. Wade decision, like they're coming for all of our rights. They're trying to force everybody back into a heteronormative patriarchal box. But the model they're trying to force us all into has been unraveling for decades. Even straight people are bailing on it. Next slide, please, Rob. So across sexualities and gender identities, people are increasingly seeking relationships of love and intimacy and care that exist beyond these heteronormative family structures. This is what Judith Stacy and others have called queering the family. So this nuclear family model is not able to meet people's economic, cultural, or emotional needs. It was never intended to. Capitalism has turned that breadwinner homemaker model into the dual earner model. All adults work outside the home to pay the rent, buy groceries. Women are expected to work the second shift for free, cooking and cleaning, bathing kids, etc.
And that's that. And for our last clip tonight, we're going to return to my favorite socialist, Mary, who again likes to say the quiet part out loud. And Mary is going to explain to us that she absolutely loves the idea of using queer relationships in order to abolish the nuclear family.
But some of their fears may be legitimate, because destroying the nuclear family through sexual liberation and queer relationship anarchy sounds pretty great.
And a round of applause comes over the audience. So I've thrown a lot at you guys, but trust me when I say that, like, what I've shown you tonight is the tip of the iceberg. In fact, when I normally give this training, I actually go way longer than what I'm doing because I have hundreds and hundreds of hours of these clips. So if you guys enjoyed that, I hope, come up here afterwards. I've got some stuff that will help you find my Substack. Of course, we're going to answer some questions and do a great Q&A. But really, what I want you to take away from right now is that this is the problem that we need to solve, because this is what they're going after. Whiteness, which means capitalism, creates the gender binary, which creates the nuclear family, which perpetuates capitalism. This is what the left believes. These are the major attacks that they're making right now with every single thing. And I could bring in stuff from environmental justice or universal health care or the Hamas protests that have been happening. I could literally pick any issue the left is talking about and tell you how it fits into the model. But these are the most important ones that we need to protect at all costs. And so we have to understand what the problem is if we're going to fight back effectively against it. And I think that we live in this society where a lot of people are making a lot of money doing content trying to tell people what the left is, what the left is, what they want. And a lot of them are so wrong. And that probably includes some of your favorite influencers and favorite content creators in this room. And I'm not going to name any names. I might do that privately if you buy me a beer or something. But what I will say is I am deeply concerned that the conservative right is being distracted by a lot of nonsense issues that are never actually going to deal with the real problems that the left is creating. Remember, if we lose capitalism, we lose our ability to own a home. We lose our ability to own land. We lose our ability to run a business. We lose parental rights. When they say it takes a village to raise children, they literally mean they want the village to raise the children. They want the children to be a part of the collective. And we lose our individual liberties. So we wouldn't even be able to have events like this. This is something that's going to impact everyone. And I think the problem is bigger than people think. And so we need to start focusing. And I hope in the Q&A we can talk more about this and flesh out some of these ideas. If you would like to hear more about this topic from me, I am going to be doing 2 live classes coming up. I actually do these on a fairly regular basis. These are virtual classes. You can sign up completely for free on my Substack. I'm going to be doing the extended version of my introductory How to Speak Socialist presentation, which is kind of a variation of what you guys just saw. These events will be recorded, so if you can't make it live, that's totally fine. But please attend if you want more information, and I promise you it's a lot scarier than you think. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Karlyn. First question. Would you be against it if we were to support you with a cash or check tonight?
No. I like cash. I like cash. But honestly, so the very best thing you can do to support me, I mean, cash and checks are fine and definitely greatly appreciated. But if you head over to my Substack and become a monthly member for $8 a month or an annual member for $80 a year, that's actually the very best way to do it because that actually is what funds the undercover and independent journalism. But all support is appreciated. Thanks, guys.
Has the FBI or authorities contacted you over January 6th at all? What was your take on that day?
Yes, actually, I was at January 6th. I was at the Capitol. I got my FBI interview and everything, and that was an interesting experience because I definitely had. I did not go inside the building, FBI. I did not, I promise. But I was standing right outside the building, and just there were I don't know if anyone was there, but there were 100,000 people on the Capitol lawn that day. It was crazy, and I sat there looking at the crowd, and I thought, I know exactly how this is going to be spun in the media. This is about to become a nightmare. My FBI interview was rather tame, I think, compared to some. They just said, did you go in the building? And I said, nope. And then they said, oh, well, what else happened that day? And I said, it was pretty crazy. And that was basically about it. But yeah, I think it's a real shame what's happened to a lot of the January 6 people, and I hope that they get justice someday.
Okay, next question. Democrats let the leftists run wild in 2020 because they wanted to wield them as a tool. They're now turning on the Democrats over Palestine. Will the establishment turn on BLM Antifa socialists before November?
No, they won't. But here's the thing: Joe Biden has actually never supported BLM. BLM has actually been pissed off at Joe Biden ever since he got into office because he wouldn't take any meetings with them. He wouldn't publicly support them or things like that. But I guess my bigger thing that I think people need to understand about this is It does not matter what the Democrats do. These people are going to do what they're going to do. Right now in New York, they're trying to commandeer like public land to decolonize it, which decolonization just means remove the oppressive force of capitalism from the land. This is why the left is so pro-Hamas, because they see what's going on in Palestine as their revolution against capitalism, with Israel being representative of capitalism. That's why they're on the side of the Palestinians. And so I also have on video, a couple months ago, I got on video, there's this group called the Party for Socialism and Liberation. They're actually running presidential candidates that are running all over the country right now. And they wrote a book called Socialist Reconstruction, and they were doing a presentation on it. It's about their vision for the future socialist America. And in that presentation, they said, we're going to have riots in 2024, and we're going to do it worse this time. I personally think it's going to be in Florida. They've been teed up about Florida for a while. There are all sorts of groups that are organized there, and they have offices there. So I do think we're in for another summer of love. I think it's going to be worse than it was in 2020. So everyone get ready.
All right, who is the main instigator of the anti-capitalist movement? Is it George Soros? Is he crashing our economy on purpose?
Ooh, this is going to be a tricky question. Okay, I'm going to tell you guys something that some of you are not going to like to hear. George Soros and the WEF are different than the radical revolutionary socialists that we're talking about tonight. Now, I'm not suggesting that they're not a problem, but they're a different problem. These are two different groups. In fact, when I'm at the private events with the socialists, they openly talk about how they hate the WEF. They hate Klaus Schwab. They don't like George Soros. They think all these people are too close to capitalism. So what we have are two, and there's more than this, but let's just deal with these two for right now, two groups that are going after the same goal, which is globalism, which is, basically the death of all of us. And they're both fighting for it, but you got to think of them as two Major League Baseball teams. They're going for the same goal. They're going to fight at some point, and we're going to be the ones that are all caught in the middle of it. So the question of who is the instigator on the left, it's a complicated one, because the left does not view themselves as individuals. The left views themselves as a collective. They are the Borg. It is a hive mind, and that is not an exaggeration. I very literally view socialism as a cult. And so how the left is structured is there's not one leader that's calling the shots. There are a lot of people that are very influential. They're the people who are writing the books. They're the people who are the academics. They have rock star activists. Like the conservative right has one activist. You got Scott Pressler. That's it. That's the only activist on the conservative right that's out there registering voters, right? The left has thousands of these activists. And so some have more clout or more status because they've done more, they've achieved more. Those are going to be your higher level true believers. And then there are all sorts of minions that exist underneath them in a very decentralized way. And what I want people to hear is that the thing that's scary about the left is if you take one of their leaders out, they just replace them with something else. It's a cog in a machine. They think of it as like a factory process. Like if one cog breaks, you take that cog out, you put another cog in, and you just keep going. Does everyone remember a lady named Robin DiAngelo? Yeah, Robin DiAngelo is a trip. Robin DiAngelo wrote a book called White Fragility that was on the New York Times bestseller list for like 11 years. Okay, maybe not that much, but like it was on the New York Times bestseller list for a while. She was very, very popular in 2020. She was the highest paid trainer running all over the place. Robin DiAngelo got very inconvenient for the left because she got caught on video too many times saying all white people are racist. So what did they do? They removed Robin DiAngelo. She still does stuff, but she does not have the status that she once did. They replaced her with other people. That's what they do.
Next question. So much of our beliefs come from a fundamental Christian belief that God gives fundamental rights as men, women, mothers, fathers, daughters, sons. How does the far left argue against this fundamental belief other than saying God is not real?
First of all, it would be a mistake to assume that everyone on the left is an atheist. They're not. There are absolutely religious people on the left. Now, they're not just Christians. They come from a variety of religions. And actually, the only time that I hear them talking about religion or the church is when they're trying to take it over and co-opt it and use it for their own purposes. So the left is not anti-religion. In fact, there are a lot of churches that have been completely co-opted by queer ideology. You look at like the United Church of Christ. The United Church of Christ, actively campaigns in favor of abortion. Like, I mean, in small little local groups and nationally, I saw a presentation on it a couple weeks ago. They're actively co-opting the Catholic Church right now at the papal level, like no joke. And so I would be hesitant to say that they're all atheists, because they're not. But what I will say is, what are they going to say to that argument? They don't care. They don't care. And I'm going to tell you guys a hard truth, and I know there are going to be people here who don't want to hear this. They're winning. And they are winning so massively that them saying, I don't care to the religion argument is really all they need to do to be effective at it. That's what happens when we have a complacent political right. I'm not saying anyone here is complacent, but I'm saying there are a lot of people who are, that allowed this problem to fester and get bigger and bigger and bigger. They've been doing this for a century, guys. It took them a century. It took them 100 years to take over the schools and to have that process be complete. And when you sit back and let stuff happen, it gets very hard to come from behind. So they can say to you, I don't care about your religion. I don't care about your beliefs. And they're going to go back on their merry way and continue to do what they want. So tough answer, but that's the answer that it is.
In your video, you mentioned that you are some level of pro-choice. I'm curious, can you explain your stance currently on that?
I was raped when I was right out of college, and I believe that all women should have a choice. And this is my personal belief. I don't put it on anyone else, but I know that if I had become pregnant as a result of that experience, I would have wanted a choice. And I don't think that's something that should ever be taken away from women. And I think that if you craft a law where you say that you can only get an abortion in the case of rape or any other tragedy that happens, I think that's going to lead to a lot more innocent men being accused of rape. And I've worked on that too. I wrote an article for Forbes several years ago called the toxicity of the Me Too movement, because a lot of innocent men were getting accused of things they didn't do. And I'm deeply concerned about that, and I wouldn't want to see that happen. So I'm for sensible limits when it comes to it, but I am pro-choice, and I'm sorry if that makes people mad, but we have bigger problems to fight, okay? If you don't want an abortion, don't get an abortion. I understand pro-life people. I understand the position.
Since you knit, did you make any pink pea hats?
No, I actually didn't. But that was a coordinated effort in the knitting community. That was actually a thing that the knitters, if you didn't knit, you could go to your local knitting store and pick up a hat, but I did not make any.
Did you visit Chop Chaz in Seattle? What are your thoughts on that protest? Are we going to see a similar event?
Oh God, I wanted to visit so bad, but I was really high profile on the right when that happened, and I was quite frankly afraid that I was going to get beat up if I went to it, but I really wanted to go. So what the Chop or the Chaz was in Seattle, it's exactly what they're trying to do in New York right now. They're trying to do it again, which is they basically took over a several block radius in Seattle. And again, this is what's called decolonization. It's when you return the land to the collective, and decolonization is what they want to see everywhere. So anytime they're doing one of these Chops or Chazes or autonomous zone things, that is the vision for the socialist utopia that they want to do everywhere. So I think seeing those things, as shocking as they are, is actually a really good exercise for people to say, I don't want to see that happen. I think we're going to start seeing more grabs like this. I think they're very inspired by what happened in Palestine. I'll tell you that. This is basically taken over the left, is the Palestine issue right now. They're very focused on it. And so I would be very surprised if we didn't see that happening in more major blue cities in the US.
What is in it, or what's the motivation for the American Psychological Association to normalize mental illness as gender-affirming care? There is no other medical or mental illness where the disorder is affirmed and encouraged.
The American Psychological Association has been captured for a number of years. I'm not a member of it. I used to be a member of it, but I stopped being a member of it when they became completely captured by the left. And so that's why they're affirming gender-affirming care. It's because they're a politically captured institution. But I will say it's not just the American Psychological Association. It's the American Psychiatric Association, who released a new version of the DSM in order to specifically push leftist policies. And the scariest thing, and we didn't talk about this today, the American Medical Association is also completely captured. And what happens with like the American Medical Association and the American Psychological Association and things like that, and I don't know if people realize this, those are the organizations that are responsible for setting the standards for accreditation in higher education. So if you don't go through an APA accredited program, you can't be licensed as a clinical psychologist. If you don't go through an AMA accredited medical program, you can't become a doctor. And so these organizations that are completely captured are literally imposing these training standards on all future psychologists, psychiatrists, and doctors. We see this in medical education right now. They are required to do anti-racism training. They're required to do DEI. The faculty are required to do it. They're required to teach to the students. And if we think that's not going to have impacts on our ability to receive adequate health care, I think we're being a little silly about that.
Is there anything on the left that isn't just a grift?
Oh, no, I mean, okay, I know why that's funny, but it's not a grift to them, guys. It's really not. This is who they are. This is what they believe. They would literally die for these beliefs. I'm being serious. This is part of their identity. So I know there are a lot of people here that the most important part of your identity is being a Christian, right? And I'm not a Christian, so I apologize if I'm not trying to offend anyone, but that's a really important part of your identity, right? To the left, being a radical, being a revolutionary, being a comrade, they literally do call each other that. That is just as central to their identity as being a Christian is to many of you. And so I don't want people to think, I mean, there are grifters everywhere. I actually think there are more grifters on the right than there are on the left. But this is something that they will lay it out on the line for. They only ever talk to other people like them. They only ever read books from people that are writing from this far left radical perspective. They only ever go to meetings and socialize with other people like them. If they found themselves cast out of the group, that would be life-changing for a lot of these people. And so I want you to know that they're serious. I have on video, I didn't play it here, but I have on video, there's a new communist party that just launched in the United States. It's called the Revolutionary Communists of America. They also launched in Canada. They launched in the United Kingdom. They launched in Sweden. They launched in Switzerland. Many other internationally coordinated efforts as well. I have them on video from last October saying their goal is to overthrow the federal government, overthrow the Supreme Court, overthrow the Senate and the House of Representatives, and raise the red flag of communism above the White House. They know that some of them are going to have to get violent for this. They know that. They know that some of them are going to sacrifice their lives for this. They know that, and they're willing to do it. And so think of it as a grift if you want, but I think that's a very easy way to dismiss them.
When are you going to move to Idaho and help us in fortifying this great state?
Yo, I live in the Free State of New Hampshire, and I don't know how many of you know about New Hampshire, but we have this little thing called the Free State Project. That means that a lot of libertarians live in New Hampshire. So Idaho's great. It's my first time here. I'm really happy to see it. But in New Hampshire, libertarians control 25% of the House of Representatives, and we nullified all federal gun laws a couple years ago. So ain't no one coming to take our guns. So what do you guys have to offer that's going to be better than that?
All right, what's your prediction? Will Joe Biden win the presidential election, and will he do it without any cheating?
Yes. I think that Joe Biden's going to win. Now, okay, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I want Joe Biden to win. I have a soft spot for Trump. Trump is hilarious, okay? Let me give you real talk. Mark told me I was allowed to do this. He said, you need to do real talk. I was like, okay. I left the left in 2020. And I voted for Trump in 2020. Ever since Joe Biden got into the White House, my perspective and the perspective of a lot of disaffected lefties and independents that I know is that the political right, I'm sure no one in this room, but many people, have done their level best to tell us to go the F away and never vote for your party again. I have been told to get the F out of the political right more times than I can count. And I feel like I became a libertarian in 2021. And I feel like I'm still getting told today, get out of our party. And I'm like, I left your party already. You told me to leave. I left. Like, what do you want me to do? And like, I feel like the political right focuses on issues a lot of times that, quite frankly, makes it very difficult for people like me to vote for you guys. And so what I'm worried about is I know that a ton of lefties defected from the left in 2020 to vote for Trump. I get that. I don't think you're going to see the same thing this time. And I think it's partly the fault of the influencers. I think the influencers drive a lot of people away because it's their job to be as extreme as possible. I also think it's the fault of the politicians because, and you all know this, I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't know, but Republican politicians suck. They suck. They suck really bad. They say they're going to do things they don't do. They side with the left all the time. And it's like you say, stop voting for these people. They suck. And you're like, but if I don't vote for them, I'm voting for a Democrat. Well, they're not any better than Democrats, guys. And so I really am deeply concerned that Joe Biden's going to win again. And I don't think he needs to cheat to do it. And I think we're in for a world of hurt when he does. I pray that I'm wrong. I really do. Nothing would make me happier. But I think we should all prepare ourselves.
How does ESG and DBI and the United Nations fit into all this?
So ESG is largely regarding like the WEF and stuff like that. It's more of a Malthusian agenda than a radical revolutionary socialist agenda. Socialists don't really even talk about it that much. Sometimes there's a little bit of overlap with groups working with the United Nations, but again, I don't really hear about the United Nations all that much. In regards to DEI, DEI is the delivery mechanism for a lot of this stuff in workplaces and in schools and things like that. So, but DEI for me is way down. It's like several notches down on the list of things I'm concerned about. It's not that I'm not concerned about it, but I feel like the thing that I am most concerned about is policies in K through 12 schools. This is like the really boring, wonky stuff because how the left has gotten gender ideology into the public schools and how all of these, GSA clubs, rainbow clubs have popped up, how it's gotten into the curriculum. It all goes back to the school policies and the school trainings, and no one's paying attention to that. Now, could you make the argument that that's tangentially related to DEI? I guess. But it's kind of its own separate beast. And so for my money, I would say the school policies are actually the most concerning thing, and I think that that's where we should be focused.
How does the left justify the pro-Hamas movement with women and homosexuals who would clearly not be safe with their beliefs in a Muslim community?
Aha, that's a great question. Okay, so I want to go back. I want to play this clip. This is a really short clip. I want to play this one again. It's relevant to my answer.
And yes, ultimately, and if that wasn't clear from the end of my talk, that will require a revolution. We cannot be free under capitalism. We cannot be free in this society as long as any person is in prison, as long as any person is denied health care for something necessary. No, that will never be free.
So what the left says is, we will not be free until everyone is free. If you want to know why Queers for Palestine is a thing, it's because queer means a far-left political ideology that is designed to destabilize normativity as an attack on capitalism. So again, it's not about being gay, it's not about being trans. They quite literally believe that until the Palestinians are free, then queer people will not be free. Until Palestinians are free, women will not be free. One of the things I didn't mention is, one of the reasons they want to abolish the gender binary is they very literally believe the only way they will achieve gender equity between the different sexes is just by getting rid of gender entirely. That's their big plan. And so their number one goal is always and forever abolish capitalism, abolish private property ownership, and they will put that above everything else. That's why you're seeing the pro-Hamas arguments, because this is, I really can't overstate this. When Hamas, paraglided into Israel, this was the start of the glorious revolution to the socialist left. This was their time. Like, they have never been so excited about anything as long as I've been tracking them. And so that's not because they have a great affinity for Palestinians. I think some of them do care about them, but that's not what it was about. It was because the oppressed population was overthrowing the settler colonist oppressors. That's what that was about. And so all of the different groups on the left will rally around this because it goes to their favorite thing, which is abolishing capitalism.
Why are the left still wearing masks?
Actually, no, This is a great question. I'm so glad someone asked this because I actually had gone undercover at 2 events where I had to wear masks, like the socialism conference and the abortion conference. And actually, it's not what you think. It is not to hide their identity. It is because the left believes in collectively caring for one another. This is one of their, and this gets a little bit into the weeds, but essentially what it is this. They see it, because they're part of a collective, they're part of a hive mind, they see it as their job to care for all of their comrades as though they were their own family. They want to abolish the family, right? They believe in a family of choice. And so the reason that they are still wearing masks at their private events to this day is because they believe that wearing a mask is an obligation of a comrade in order to care for other comrades. That's really what it is. It's not that they're trying to hide their identities. That might be a bonus to it, but that's what they do this behind closed doors. It's not just for public show.
How well armed and trained are the socialists for achieving their goals?
More than you might think. More than you might think. I've watched presentations where they talk about making sure they're armed. They have socialist gun clubs. This is actually a very big thing in Texas. I know a woman named Gabrielle Clark. She is an activist for gender ideology in Texas, and she will flat out tell me that socialists will show up at rallies in Texas wearing AR-15s. So it would be a mistake to assume they're not armed. They're armed in some cities more than others, some states more than others, but they're not. They've got guns, and they know how to use them.
So you say you dress up to go to these. Do you have a good story about being exposed?
I don't have a good story about being exposed. I have not actually been exposed at an event yet. It's actually kind of funny. People ask me, like, how can you do this and they don't recognize you? Well, the left is inherently selfish. They're very self-focused. And so if you're, and you can think about it as any big event that you've ever gone to, are you looking at everyone going, are you that YouTuber that, you know, watches socialism on the internet? You don't do that. You go about your business. You kind of keep your head down. You talk to your friends. And so I make myself look different enough where I just kind of like pass in the wind. But it was actually funny because at the socialism conference, I ran a little experiment because the socialism conference is run by an organization called Haymarket Books. Haymarket Books is the largest socialist book publisher in the United States. And I had actually been streaming Haymarket Books' content for like a year. They knew who I was. And so months prior to the socialism conference, I registered under a fake name. And then as it was kind of getting closer, I was like, I wonder what would happen if I just registered under my real name. I wonder if they would actually just let me go to the conference. And so I also registered under my real name. And so what happened is registration closed, and then the day after registration closed, it was like 2 days before the conference, I get an email from them saying, you are not welcome at our conference based on your social media posts. And I responded back, but why? Like, what did I say on my social media? They never answered me. But I was like, I'm registered under a fake name, so I'm gonna go anyway. Like, I didn't really care. But what was funny is when I was getting on the plane in Boston to go to Chicago, I got an email from my hotel that they had canceled my reservation. And I called the hotel. I was like, what the hell? I'm literally flying. I was like literally in the Delta Club at the airport. And they told me, someone told us to cancel your reservation. And I was like, what the what? So they literally had a socialist on staff at that hotel go through to find me, because I couldn't register under a fake name at the hotel, to cancel my reservation. So I had to think fast, and I got another hotel room, and it all worked out. But they did try to keep me out, but it was not successful.
Karlyn, you have a unique skill set and expertise, and we're thankful for what you do. Next question is why? Why do you do what you do?
Obsession. I was telling someone earlier, I've tried to quit. I've tried to quit several times. I very literally do believe, to get real for a second, I really do believe I've descended into the mouth of madness doing this. I am not the same person I was 3 years ago. It's a lot, but I've always been obsessed with dystopian things. Since I was a little kid, I love dystopian books, I love dystopian movies, and now I'm in this world where I'm watching real life dystopia happen right in front of me. And it's scary, man, and it's dark, but it's also, you see some of the craziest things that you never would have seen otherwise. And so I've tried to quit multiple times. It sometimes does get to me. You can go on my YouTube channel and find videos of me crying and yelling and like all this stuff. 'Cause I'm a human being. It gets to me after a while. But I think what I've come to is, the Christians in the room are going to love this. I do think it's a calling. I really do. I think I'm in this position for a reason. I think it's like a ridiculous confluence of events that led me to being in this position that are just, if you think about the odds of it happening, it's extraordinary. And I can't quit. The universe won't let me quit. God won't let me quit. Every time I try, I get booted in the butt right back into it. And so I've kind of accepted at this point that this is something I'm supposed to do for some reason, and I don't really know why. And but I'm trying to make the best of it. And more days than not, it's really exciting and really interesting. And so I'm very blessed to be able to do what I do.
At these different conferences, are there symbols of Satanism and the occult that you see?
No, actually, no, not at all. Actually, I know people. I have supporters that are actually in the Church of Satan. No, that's not why they support me, but they just are. They don't like any of this stuff. Actually, the left is more infiltrated into the Christian churches than they are into like the satanic stuff. So I wouldn't assume that this is, although there are things that are demonic about it. I will say this, so, and there's videos of me talking about this on my YouTube channel as well, but when I was in that multiple personality disorder as a gender identity presentation, I really do believe I got possessed by some demonic force, because I was, like, people don't understand how hard it is to kind of like sit in some of these presentations and you can't react. I can't laugh, I can't make like big eyes, I can't do any of the things you might see me do on video because I'm supposed to be on their team. And so I was literally sitting there and just felt like something came over me in that presentation where something in my brain popped. I was feasing for like 2 hours after that, and it was like an unholy force that came over me. So I'm not going to say there's nothing demonic about it, but I don't see like pentagrams or symbols or anything like that that would lead me to believe it's demonic. And again, I would really encourage you guys, make sure you are rooting this out of your churches, because they are actively trying to co-opt them to use them against you.
What tips do you have for waking up the NPCs who can be woken up?
Well, first of all, don't assume they can't be woken up, because if you assume they can't be woken up, then they never will be, right? But what I would say is that waking up takes time. It takes time, and it takes energy, and it takes kindness, and it takes empathy. People who knew my story from the Trump rally, a lot of how it got painted in the media was this Democrat went to a Trump rally and the Trump rally changed everything. No, that's not what happened. What happened was 6 to 9 months prior to the Trump rally, social justice took over my knitting community. They started acting crazy. At the same time, all of my friends who were all raging progressives started demanding I go to anti-racism training. And I was like, what is going on? And I kind of like was like, my friends are losing their minds. Like, everyone's really obsessed with Trump. I was never that. I never hated Trump the way most people did. And so it was just seeing little things like that's weird, that's weird, that's weird. And then I started challenging myself to listen to videos of people I thought I would disagree with, like your Ben Shapiro's, who I don't like anymore, but he was fine back then, like, or Milo Yiannopoulos, or any of like these crazy like right-wingers who I always were told were really dangerous. And I just kept watching these videos, and I was like, these people aren't that bad. Okay, they might be a little crazy and I don't agree with them on everything, but they're not the worst people in the world. And it took months. It took months, and I was making a concerted effort, and I feel like I've got a more open mind than a lot of people do. And so I really do think that waking people up just takes a lot of time, and I think it takes a lot of kindness, and it takes a lot of understanding, because you have to understand that when you wake up from the left, you have to admit, I was a Democrat for 20 years. I grew up in Vermont, guys. I voted for Bernie Sanders in every election that I could vote for Bernie Sanders in. You have to admit that everything that you ever trusted about the world is wrong. And it is a hard thing to admit to. And I want to be honest, there are some things that people on the conservative right need to wake up to as well. It's not just leftists who need to wake up. People on the right need to wake up too. And they struggle to do it as well. I think it's just part of the human condition that we don't like to admit that we're wrong. We don't like to kind of like reverse engineer things that we believe to be true. And I mean, I'm still waking up to things to this day. Like, very literally, your whole world falls apart. And so I would just say, have patience, have kindness, talk to people, plant seeds. Don't argue with them. Don't debate them. Don't say, well, you should have woken up years ago. I mean, I had this thrown in my face. I still have this thrown in the face, in my face by the right today. That you've only been awake for 4 years. What do you really know? Okay, well, that's not how you win people over. You need to win over independents and disaffected lefties and people who hate Trump for any variety of reason. Now, those are all different audiences. But I will say that a lot of DeSantis supporters are not friendly to Trump right now, and they don't want to vote for him, and that is Ron DeSantis' fault for running in the first place when he damn well shouldn't have. And I don't know how many DeSantis supporters are in this room, but that created a lot of division within the right that I'm not sure Trump's going to be able to win those people back. I think Democrats were voting for Nikki Haley, so I don't think she was an issue. But what I will say is that, again, like from the perspective of someone who, I'll just be honest, guys, like I have had to deal with more problems from the conservative right attacking me over the past couple of years than I have from the left. I focus all my energy on the left, and I'm attacked every single day by some conservative influencer or someone with a big platform or any of that. You want to know why I don't want to be associated with the right? It's because they don't want me there and they don't treat me well and they don't respect what I do. And I have an entire audience full of people that sees the right acting like the left was acting in 2020. So if you want to change it, you've got to start reaching out to people and meeting them where they are. Don't call them evil if they're pro-choice. They probably have a good reason for it. Maybe you can have a good discussion about it. I look at someone like, does anyone know Kathy Barnett? Kathy Barnett is amazing. She ran for Senate in Pennsylvania. Kathy Barnett had probably one of the most effective campaign ads that I've ever seen. It was an anti-abortion campaign ad where she told the story about how her mother got pregnant when she was 10 and she didn't have an abortion and she had Kathy, and it was just like this really heartwarming ad. Those are the types of conversations that need to happen. I have been called a baby killer 19 ways from Sunday because I say publicly I'm pro-choice. I have never had an abortion. That's how I'm treated by conservatives. And I don't mean to make anyone feel bad, but I do want to give you guys a window into what it's like to be someone who, I literally talk about how crazy the left is all the time. They're not the ones causing problems in my life. So if you want to get more independents, you want to get more disaffected lefties to vote for you, treat them well. Listen to their concerns. Have conversations with them. Show them that you hear them. Don't demonize them. Welcome them onto the team. I tell people all the time, I would never wake up today. It would never happen. Because when I woke up in 2020, the right was talking about a big tent and about individual liberties and about how all perspectives are welcomed and valued. We haven't heard anything about a big tent in years. So revive the big tent. Focus on the things that everyone can agree on. Like, it's not that you can't have your personal values, but we have to start focusing on the bigger pictures and stop attacking each other, stop infighting over no good reason. There are real enemies out there, and there are things that people can coalesce behind, and that's what needs to be focused on.
Had the opportunity to listen to Trevor Luden and
He's the best.
James
Yes.
Lindsay present on similar subject matters. Do you have a handful of people that you share information with, and can you share with the people here who you like to learn from as well?
I think that Trevor Loudon is incomparable. I really do. I think the world of Trevor Loudon. I don't so much think the world of James Lindsay. And I'll tell you why. I used to really love James Lindsay. I learned a lot from James Lindsay. I very literally dedicated the last chapter in my book to James Lindsay because when I wrote it, there was no one better than him. And I really do believe that if everyone was fighting as hard as he was fighting when I wrote this book, we wouldn't have a problem right now. What I will say is that James Lindsay does not want to work with anyone who does not kiss his ass. To be very blunt with you. James Lindsay has openly attacked me. James Lindsay has openly tweeted for his audience to block me and my entire audience because we tried to show him the primary source video that you guys are seeing tonight. But James Lindsay does not deal in primary source video. He deals in academic papers. And so it's very inconvenient for him when I'm showing primary source video that contradicts some of the arguments that he's making in his new book specifically. The idea that there is a Gnostic sex cult and that is what queer theory theory is about is absurd. That is not real. James Lindsay is making a fortune selling that idea to the conservative right. And I really do believe, and I've said this on my YouTube channel, I'll say it publicly here, I believe that James Lindsay is going to get people's kids taken away with the disservice and irresponsibility that he's doing to the right. So I don't intend to bring up any names, but you asked, and so I'll say that about him. Who do I share information with? I will share information with anyone that wants to learn and wants to look at primary source evidence. I have tried more than I can even tell you guys to get this information out into conservative media, get it into the hands of conservative influencers. My audience has tried, like they've tried sending it out. It is very hard to find anyone who will take the time to listen and will take the time to look at the evidence. And that personally to me is very disappointing because again, I don't think this is a competition. I don't think I'm in competition with anyone. I think there's more than enough work that we can all do to fight back against this. There are a lot of activists that have quite literally given up their lives to do this, but among the influencer and the content creator set, there are very few people listening and very few people paying attention. I'll end with a good one. I think that Andy No is incomparable as well. He and I exchange DMs every now and again. I think he's doing a wonderful job and is a wonderful person to learn from. But my advice to everyone is go to the primary sources. Just watch the video. Like you can see what the left is doing. You don't have to listen to anyone's interpretation. You can see directly what they're doing for yourselves. And that I think is the very best place to get your information from.